on if you're know or not. And I find it's always good to keep track of what Carolina's working on because it's always interesting and quite relevant for network science as a discipline, but also policy and navigating between those. So Carolina, thank you for coming. Take it away.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I'm Carolina, for those of you who don't know me. I did my PhD here at Northeastern at the Network Science Institute, graduating in 2020. After that, I was a postdoc at the Computational Network Science Lab in Leiden with Frank Takis for a couple of years. And now I'm a researcher at Chantai in Turin. And I'm going to talk today about stringing a couple of papers together on the circulation of digital money. I don't know if there's anybody here now, but those of you who did see my dissertation defense might recognize a few pictures, but only a few. There's quite a bit of work since then in here, and I'm happy to be able to kind of tie it back together under this heading here, the circulation of digital money. So part of what's interesting about the circulation of digital money is that money is not normally something that we look all that closely at. Within economics, money is generally considered very much in aggregate. So something like the velocity of money is, it's a number that's reported by, in this case, the Federal Reserve, and it's defined as the GDP, so it's a really big number, divided by M2, which is amount of issued currency, bank deposits, and money market mutual funds. So another really big number. And so we have this time series of one really big number divided by another really big number. So this is like very much in aggregate. And that brings up a few problems. This is the chair of the US Federal Reserve from a couple years ago, talking about the kind of now post-COVID kind of boom we were having. Saying out loud at the ECB forum on inflation that in light of now these post-COVID events, we understand better how little we understand about inflation. So I wrote down that quote. I'm like, all right, please, I will put that on my slide because it can be a problem when we consider all of the money together in aggregate. And that's because modern payment infrastructure is not It isn't in practice all of the money all together. Modern payment infrastructure, this is of course a stylized version, but it looks something more like this. You have your national currencies, but your national currency systems are really a constellation of different payment systems within them, different banks. Like when you pay somebody else, you pay via one system, and then the banks communicate in the background. It's very much infrastructure, an infrastructure that we very rarely notice lying behind national currencies. And then we have seen a bit more attention recently on money because we've seen the kind of rise in attention, or in the case of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies, also like market cap, of what are called complementary currencies. So these are currencies that are not backed by any particular central bank, not managed not managed on behalf of a national government. We're going to be focusing today on this tiny one over here. It's called Sarafu, and it's very cute, but there's quite a few other complementary currencies as well. And so the circulation, when we think about the circulation of money not in aggregate, it can maybe help to take a look at what is happening behind the scenes and where is the money kind of actually moving. And it's sometimes fun to imagine also, there's at least a few financial institutions here in Boston, if you look out at the big skyscrapers we have. So for all of the circulation of money that's happening behind the scenes, the data is there somewhere in most of the cases. Like there's a lot of digital money out there that we're using now. And so whatever servers they're on, that doesn't mean we get to study it, but when we think about the circulation of digital money, it is at least kind of in theory very, very observable. So for the rest of this talk, we're going to talk about the circulation of digital money, three pieces of it. We're going to talk about the data, theory, and the tools. And the data, what does transaction data show empirically? If you can get your hands on it, what does it look like? And then in theory, how do we represent circulation theoretically? And then point also to some tools. What do we need to be able to do in practice? Maybe there should be a shadow bullet point here. Policy, we can talk about that one offline. It can be a little bit more sensitive how to get all these things together, how to get it to happen in practice, how to get this research to happen in practice. But first off, oh no, I deleted the title on this. It's supposed to say Sarafu CIC 2021-2022. This is a data description project by myself, a collaborator, PhD student at CEU, and person named William Reddick, who runs Grassroots Economics Foundation. Here we go. Here's the title. So Sarafu CIC, Sarafu is a community inclusion currency. It's a parallel currency, not Kenyan shillings. It can be used in parallel with Kenyan shillings. And it's a Grassroots Economics has been around for quite a while, and they've been working with and introducing parallel currencies into areas of Kenya for a long time. They were physical, but then they've over the past 10 years moved over to digital money. And so Sarafu is a community currency that can be used in parallel with Kenyan shillings, and you use it in practice via digital payments via your phone. Sarafu specifically, we're interested in it partly because Sarafu was very actively used over a period that saw considerable economic disruption due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But in all seriousness, the dislocation in Kenya was quite dramatic, particularly in urban areas, right as the economy shut down. And Sarafu was at that point, it was set up to be a complementary currency for anyone who had a Kenyan phone number. And so you could send a message to kind of sign up with your phone number to Sarafu, and they would boop some e-money onto your phone. And then you could use that Sarafu to trade with anybody who would accept Sarafu, right? Sometimes people would do like part of the transaction in shillings, part of the transaction in Sarafu, kind of using these next to each other. And it's especially a particularly interesting case on its own, this Sarafu data set, in the case of Sarafu in this particular time, because complementary currencies are known to see spikes in usage levels during periods of economic disruption. When normal money is not working well, the economy is kind of like the money's not moving, it's not working. People, if there's a complementary currency available, people will move to and start using that complementary currency. So this kind of overall use and spike in behavior is known. And what's nice for our purposes is that Sarafu is its own currency, and these records are exhaustive. So all of the circulation of Sarafu was happening within this particular, within this system for which we have all of the data. If you remember from some of the slides before, that's not the case for a national currency where the actual processing of payments is fragmented across many, many different systems. So Sarafu is its own currency, and these records are exhaustive. And the other nice thing about it is that this data set is, me and Theodora helped make it publicly available. So you can go on to UK Data Service, their reshare repository. You have to, behind one layer of, find a good layer of protection. You have to agree not to de-identify the people and to like use the data in a respectful way for research. And then this is data that is available. And we also wrote a data descriptor paper, which is a very interesting type of publication. If you're working with any data set that is on its own, like interesting to publish, I recommend looking into it. This journal we went through is called Nature Scientific Data. So if you're interested in reading about all the like minutia of the Sarafu data, that is there. So On the data front, there is now a data set of transactions that can be nice to study. And so that's what I get to talk to you about now. Now that we have this data that we can work with, I'm gonna go through what we did to analyze the circulation within this particular currency system. And we were using, at this point, kind of existing tools, so existing network science tools. So we're not developing all that much theory here. This is more kind of what you do, combining data and tools. So when we put all of the transactions, we have all of the transactions among around 40,000 nodes. What we did here was we put them all together, we collapsed them all down into a flow network. So we have accounts, and the links between them are the total Sarafu that was transferred from one account to the other over this entire time period, which, if I'm not mistaken, is January 2020 through part of June 2021. So there's just under 300 million total Sarafu transferred. It's among the prettiest networks I've ever had the chance to plot, to draw. So that's nice. The colors here correspond to one of the two features that we have for the accounts. So when people signed up for accounts, they reported kind of where they were and their kind of main economic activity, what they were planning to sell to get more Sarafu, like what they wanted to do. So this is colored by the aggregated geographic area that was fit to share publicly. Mukuru is a slum in Nairobi. There's also other parts of Nairobi. Mombasa is a town on the other side, city, very big city on the other side of Kenya. And Kinango Kwale is a rural area where there were quite a few different towns that had been starting to use Sarafu or had been using Sarafu for quite some time already. Yeah.
Is there a way to move see the...
You can't see the, right. There we go. Yeah. Yes. Now also the people in the room can see the legend here, what the different colors mean. Mukuru, Nairobi, and Kinango Kwale are the main ones to keep your eye on. Yeah. So we can ask a few very specific questions about circulation of this particular currency, and we can answer them with network science. So here we go. First very concrete question: among whom was Sarafu circulating? And for this, we can do community detection. Because this is a flow network, we want a flow-based method, specifically InfoMap. InfoMap identifies modules where a walker would tend to remain. So it would kind of model the flows based off of a walk. But if you have real measured flows, you can do --raw, and it just uses the flows you have in the InfoMap calculation, doesn't actually simulate any walks. And so what we get here what we get coming out of that is a hierarchical map of nodes to modules where as much circulation as possible is happening within the modules. And this works quite well. I don't know if you've even noticed that the colors changed. Now, instead of being the geographic areas, these are the top level InfoMap modules. And first kind of thing is that circulation is very modular. In the top 5 modules, we are capturing 99.7% of the transaction volume within these top level modules, and the rest would be between them. InfoMap is also nice in that it is hierarchical. If we go down to the second level modules, these are kind of the modules within the larger modules, we find that there are 37 of them that have more than 100 accounts. And within these second level modules, we capture all but 3.5% of the transaction volume. So some of the results later on, we'll split these apart and look at the 37 different modules separately. So circulation is very modular, and we can now kind of correlate these to the geographic area and state with confidence that circulation is predominantly local. There's a strong correspondence between the module or the submodule and the reported geographic area of most users in that subpopulation. So circulation is geographically constrained, and the areas labeled in the data even actually appear to be amalgamations of smaller localities. We can also look at the other node attribute that we have, where there are 14 categories where the user-reported livelihoods were grouped. Things that the biggest ones are farming in rural areas and labor in urban areas, as well as selling food and fuel and energy, these kinds of things. And we see that there's not a correspondence between the grouping and the reported livelihood. So we have diverse livelihoods within many of these second level sub-modules, which kind of makes sense in the sense that if you want a local economy to keep going, if you want a community currency to keep going, you can't have everybody doing the same thing. You need diverse livelihoods within there to keep this kind of local ecosystem going. So from the perspective of the average user, 70% of their subpopulation reports a category of economic activity that is different from theirs. So nobody is in the majority most of the time. So now we have a clear answer to this question using network science. Circulation was geographically local, occurring among users with diverse livelihoods. You can also ask some kind of purely network structure questions. What is the underlying network structure? Here we look at, we compare the now undirected, unweighted network structure of the 37 submodules with less than 100 accounts, and we compare them to your standard null models, Erdős-Rényi and degree kept, in this case, exponential random graph. And we see that there is an overrepresentation of short cycles. Also, the null model matters, and we mostly want to look at this one, right? And we see that there is an overrepresentation of 2 cycles in almost every module, and then in some of the kind of largest, most used modules in Mukuru, Nairobi in particular, and also in Kinangop Valley, also some of other cycles. So many short cycles, overrepresentation of short cycles. We find degree disassortativity consistently across every or almost every of the 37 sub-modules with more than 100 accounts. This, in case you haven't, in case this is the first time that you are hearing about these kinds of networks, this is actually a result that is somewhat standard across economic networks. Disassortativity is something that we tend to find in economic networks, be it with currency networks or like from currency data also within Bitcoin, as well as production networks with companies and connections among them. So degree disassortativity. And then we find a bit of, or substantial positive values on assortativity for gender and registration time, so kind of cohort when people joined the system, but these are not so consistent across modules. So in some, but not all submodules, we see that. So just some network stuff. Disassortativity, what does disassortativity mean? This will come back in the next picture. Disassortativity means that you would have local hubs that connect to mostly smaller ones. So circulation requires cycles, and local hubs are playing a key structural role. And then we can also ask, who are the prominent Sarafu users? And for this, we look at network centrality. Again, we're going to use a flow-based network centrality because we're working with a flow network. So we use weighted PageRank, and weighted PageRank would then identify hubs where walkers would tend to visit often. We are using the real measured flow, and there's this kind of like neat little connection to what we might think of as the equilibrium balance. In fact, we find a correlation with the empirical account balances. It's not so high, but it's consistent across a range of parameter values, including 0.05, which is the default for PageRank always. So we have, again, confirmation that 0.85 is a good parameter for PageRank. But other way, gosh. But looking at this network, you can see that the hubs, this is how disassortativity shows up in this network. The hubs, the dark nodes, are kind of spread across. They're not all grouped together. So in practice, that's what disassortativity means, is that hubs are local, not the popular people are not friends with other popular people necessarily. So we can also do a regression on the centrality measure to characterize the prominent users. We find that the accounts held by community financial institutions, these savings groups, are far and away the most likely to be very central to be these local hubs. There are not that many of them. There are 264 savings groups accounts. If we look at the kind of more statistically significant increase in centralities among the groups that are larger, we can see that female account people who report their gender as female and early adopters are a bit more prominent, a bit more likely to be central. But the savings groups is the main finding here, was perhaps expected. But in any case, I know not necessarily any surprises here, but the most prominent Sarafu users are the community-based financial institutions. These are the local hubs. We have the early adopters, and women are a bit more likely to be central in the network. So circulation of this specific digital community currency. Circulation is geographically local, covering users with diverse livelihoods. Community-based financial institutions take on key roles. Early adopters and women are especially likely to be central. We also have degree, disassortativity, and cycles. This is kind of a demonstration by example of what we can do with network analysis when we do have relatively complete transaction data. So this is an analysis for these cute little Sarafu community currency, which was operating in Kenya during the COVID pandemic. But we can imagine, or like let our minds consider a little bit what this kind of analysis, what kind of results we would get if we were able to apply it to other data sets around in the world. But that data is not really available. And in order to get towards a world where such closely held data is made available to researchers more often for the public goods of research, it's perhaps useful to make some progress on the theory side. So let's take a bit of a digression into theory. We're going to talk about circulation as a walk process. When I say a walk process, I mean things like this. I mean processes where, systems, processes where there is something tangible. There's something tangible that is moving from node to node. So within payment systems, we have money moving from account to account. In a football game, we have the ball moving from person to person. I don't know how the Netherlands is doing, but I hope they're doing better than before. But so the ball is moving from player to player, or if in air travel, you would have passengers moving from airport to airport on flights, right? So each event is now a step in a walk process, and each of these steps is moving something tangible from one node to another. So the defining features of a real-world walk process, I would say, are these two. And there's a bit more discussion of this in this paper, Trajectories Through Temporal Networks, if you're curious. But real-world walk processes, what really defines them is, first, that they must maintain their integrity in practice. So there's a sense that tangible items are moving around. What makes tangible items tangible is that they tend to stay where they are placed and not suddenly multiply or disappear. Passengers don't vanish. If they do, you'll hear it over the loudspeaker. And then payment systems do a ton of bookkeeping to make sure that they don't lose track of funds. This is within engineered systems anyway, this is not necessarily automatic. And so the result there, in my observation anyway, is that real world walk processes are going to be rarely, if ever, self-contained. There's also going to be processes that create and destroy walkers that are distinct from the walk process itself and often substantively important. Within a football game, there are, or soccer, I should say, I am in Boston, shoot, has lots of rules. There's times when the ball leaves play and enters play. If suddenly 2 balls come onto the field, the referee will very quickly make sure that that does not continue, because that's not what's going on, right? Like there's a particular, there's someone there to make sure that this process goes as it should, including all of the times when the process stops and restarts. And then on the payment system side, you have ATMs, transfers between different banks. Money creation in the form of loans and money dissolution in the form of loans being paid back, the literal minting of coins, etc. So I want to come back to this maintaining integrity piece, because when you say it, it sounds obvious, but it is not necessarily. It is a big deal. So these are some photos from a New York Times article on kind of profiling the CEO of Liberty Bank. Liberty Bank was a Black-owned bank in operating in New Orleans, and talking about how Liberty Bank handled the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. What happened was that the servers were flooded, and until Liberty was reconnected to the global banking network, the CEO and his colleagues, the bank itself, could have no idea how much money each customer had in his or her account. But he was imagining his customers camping out in hotels around the country, racking up expenses, and he increased the daily maximum ATM withdrawal to $500. And he simply hoped that if he let people withdraw money, that they would have the money in their accounts to cover the withdrawn cash. Not all of them did, and that decision cost Liberty Bank roughly $1 million in payouts to people who did not, in fact, have the funds in their bank account to cover those withdrawals. So glitches in the system, times when 2 + 2 does not equal 4 within the actual real practical system of money, the banking networks communicating behind the scenes to get us our money. It works so well that we barely ever notice it, but there is a lot going on behind the scenes, and cases where it does glitch, or cases like this where like deliberate decisions are taken to break the integrity of this particular walk process, they're interesting enough to make the news almost every time. So maintaining integrity is a big deal. Money only seems seamless. If we look at it behind the scenes, there's a lot going on. Just like any infrastructure, we don't tend to notice it until it breaks. So now my last little piece here, I'm going to talk about a tool. This is now work that I started during my PhD here. Am I not sharing my screen? I think I am sharing my screen. Okay, sorry. So I'm gonna share now. I'm gonna talk now about a project where we are developed a tool, a method, bringing in some of this theory here of walk processes on networks. so that we can better analyze in practice what's going on within payment systems where it's not the case of Sarafu, where there's the whole currency system is one payment system, but in this more kind of fragmented real case where you have different payment systems, transactions happening across banks and between banks and via many different payment systems. So it's difficult to study this kind of data, and it's difficult to study this kind of data. There's kind of not that much, or there's a lot of basic work to be done, I suppose, is the answer here. So here's some project that I was doing on that. We're calling it trajectory extraction. So what does trajectory extraction mean? Trajectory extraction is our method to trace digital money. So we're taking each transaction and we are tracing the money from account to account, and that we're turning transactions into transaction sequences. And the transaction sequences, we're tracing all of the money through all of the accounts all at once. And so you end up with a whole data set of transaction sequences, many, many transaction sequences, going from where money is entering the system to where money is exiting the system. And that's this, this method very specifically that we can now talk about when we do it on data. What does that look like, adding the data back in? Circulation now in a payment system, not a full currency system, but just one payment system. So here I was working during my PhD, working on a mobile money payment system via connections with via David and through several of his contacts at various places. Was able to work with data from a mobile money payment system. So now this is real. This is real money. I can't say which country, but it is the national currency that we're talking about. But it's the same. It's the same text-based interface. So people sending money via the equivalent of a text message, actually USSD. So sending money, it's connected to your phone number, and you can transfer money to another person. But again, it is part of the national currency system, and so the e-money that is on your phone needs to be exchangeable with cash. And the way that this is done in this area with mobile money is with people who act as I guess human ATMs, but they're not really tellers, but they are often people who would be selling prepaid cards and have now kind of transitioned into being an agent of the mobile money provider. So now let's say that if I want to transfer money to Brennan, I would go to this agent and I would give them cash. They would give me e-money, and then I can make a digital transaction to Brennan by typing in some codes on my phone, and then Brennan would receive the digital money, and then he could go to his nearest agent, and if he wants to, convert that money back into cash. So that's mobile money payment system. This particular one was working via the IFC and microfinance opportunities. I don't know if anybody's talked to Guy on the 4th floor. We were working with this provider's 5 million accounts, around 400,000 agents, 300 million transactions, and the equivalent of about $2 billion over the time period that we were looking transferred via this system. And what we were using to study the system, or what we needed to understand for how people to begin to analyze this system, is to understand that just like the transaction from me to Brendan here, it's actually a sequence of transactions going on. A transfer is maybe not just a transfer, but because we have this interface with the other system, you have a lot of deposits and a lot of withdrawals and a lot of actions that only make sense if we think of it in terms of sequences. So we use trajectory extraction to trace the money, and now we're looking at the sequential patterns in these sequences. So this one that I just told you about, cash in, P2P transfer, cash out. This is kind of the prototypical mobile money behavior. The e-money would go from an agent to a user to a user to another agent. And so we call this we'll call this series let's call this series the transfer series. And this, we can say, is from this particular data set, it's capturing just over 11% of all of the deposits coming into this system. It's also possible via this system to make bill payments or to top up your mobile phone. And the sequential pattern that would kind of correspond to this then would be a cash in followed by a bill payment or a top up payment. The e-money would go from the agent to the user to the company. Now, we'll call these payments and micropayments. Top-ups tend to be very tiny. And we see that combined about 11% of deposits take this route. We can also see that people in this East African country pay their bills just as last minute as we do. The median duration for this whole sequence when it comes from a cash in to a bill pay is 15 minutes. So most of them are happening very, very quickly. Now, you can do each of these things, transfer to somebody else, make a payment, or top up your phone using money that you already have on your account, right? Not money that you just cashed in, right? And this is what the provider would really like for people to do, maintaining this infrastructure where you're exchanging, where you're having people exchange their e-money into cash is quite costly. You have to pay commissions to agents. You have to keep track of a bunch of cash. You're kind of responsible for a lot at that interface between e-money and cash. So it would be great if this was a lot. Unfortunately, it is not. So the kind of substantial finding here is that only just over 2% of activities that people were engaging with in the system they were using circulating money. This does not add up to nearly 100%. So what's left? Well, what's left is a pattern of just doing a cash in and then a cash out. And this cash in, cash out pattern, in out pattern, is capturing more than 70% of deposits are being used in this way. There are a few explanations for this. The most charitable, the nicest would be if this was savings behavior. People are putting their money onto people are putting their cash into e-money so that they can save it and use it later. However, the median time for these transactions is rather short. So certainly there's some savings going on, but not so much. The kind of favored explanation from the existing literature on mobile money would be that this is money storage. People need somewhere to put cash for a while as they make their way across town or as they are kind of managing funds. And so this, so that's be called kind of money storage. And then there are also various forms of fraud that might have this behavior. A fairly benign one would be if me sending money to Brennan, instead of cashing into my account, sending it to Brennan, and then he cashing it out, I just cash into his account directly. That's a fairly benign one. We'll see a less benign one later. But yeah, so mobile savings, maybe a bit. Money storage, solid potential explanation, and then also possibly various frauds. So now we want to make this into a pretty network. So we want to map the flow of e-money, but now we're looking at sequences, right? So we're mapping the flow of e-money through the system, not kind of circulation within the system. That makes sense. There's a bit of that too, of course. So to visualize this table, what we're going to do is group these different motifs together, and then we're going to aggregate by the entry and exit point. So we're going to take all of these trajectories, all of these observed walks, whatever you want to say, and then we're going to get rid of the users in between, and we're just going to be looking at the network of agents. So the flow of money through the system via these agents. And there we can, what do these look like? Well, let's start with the payment one. So 12% of the deposits were used for these payments. And what we see here are some huge hubs, right? So we see the different colors are the agents in various parts of the country. Color corresponds to parts of the country. And then money going into the handful of, into the accounts of the handfuls of companies that offer bill payments and top-ups on this service. So the lines between the hubs would then would be coming from agents who have ties to agents who facilitate bill payments to multiple companies. The transfers, so kind of most prototypical behavior, the economic activity that we would like for the system to be used for the most, looks about like this, which is almost studiously random to my eye. The folks we were working with would have loved for me to find more patterns within this, like, okay, how can we get more of this happening? But it really seems like there's money being transferred via this e-money transfer service. There's a bit of geographical cohesion, but mostly like everywhere to everywhere, kind of in a nice randomish pattern. And then when you plot the in out, we have some of the nodes making this pattern over here, and most of the nodes coming together into this pattern over here. On the right, I guess it is, on the right would corresponds fairly well, I think, to the money storage explanation, where you have more of a geographic constraint. People are using this to transfer money or kind of keep money as they are moving around the city, moving around the region, etc. But then we also see this is identifiable via the K-core. We're doing the weighted K-core, and there's about 4,000 nodes who look a bit suspicious to me. And in the end, we did find that they were quite suspicious. You have these funny little clicks that are capturing kind of more deposits, more of the circulation than you might expect. And what we found was going on here is that there was the folks at the IFC were able to give us the agent commission schedule. And what we are finding here is that it was possible to, okay, so the background is that agents get paid a commission on both deposits and withdrawals, but the user only pays a fee on the withdrawals. And so there is a way to structure it, because the commission structure was tiered. There's a way to structure it so that you make a bunch of tiny deposits and then one big withdrawal, where the agents involved make more in commissions than the user pays in fees. And so what we see going on here, there's a table extra if you want to see it, but it's quite convincing that that's what's going on here, that you have these little groups of agents who have however many accounts set up to facilitate this particular type of agent fraud among them. So if you thought the funny little clicks in an economic network looked suspicious, you were right. They are. It is a bit suspicious. So putting this up here, not just because like it's a cool analysis to be able to do and quite useful, but also because it reads like the highlight reel of a network science textbook. We have some hubs, we have some random structure, we have some highly clustered groups, we have some almost clicks, and then we have some kind of geographical modules, geographic clustering. So I think it's worth considering what these correspond to in this particular case. We have this pattern where we have a network structure with hubs corresponding to payments to large companies. We have peer-to-peer exchange, and then we have a bit of like a strategic coordination going on. And then when we have geographic clustering, we're talking about people managing their businesses at a localized level. And from that, we can start to, again, think to like, okay, what might this look like in other data? What type of network structure would it look like for when people are receiving wages, when people are purchasing goods, when businesses are paying their suppliers, when people and businesses are serving their loans, as people are investing, trading? What does taxation look like? What does allocation look like? What does redistribution look like in terms of flow networks? So that was a kind of big picture. Nice to kind of come back and think, okay, where does this leave us? What can we, where can we go from here? I've talked about what does transaction data show empirically from a community currency as well as a mobile money payment system. Talked about how we can represent circulation theoretically, and one tool that that I've developed to have us kind of better able to do what we need to do in practice. Right. Digital transaction data can provide an extremely high resolution view of economic activity where it is available. Circulation of money can be viewed in the network theory sense as a real world walk process. And then network analysis tools that are based on flows and walk dynamics end up producing highly interpretable findings when they're applied to transaction data, applied to study the circulation of digital money. Looking forward, payment systems are increasingly digital, and so it is conceivable, and we should not hide the fact that it's conceivable, to map and analyze with network analysis even major currency systems. On the theoretical network science side, real-world walk processes can and should be extensively modeled. Within network science, we talk about random walks a lot. There's been less of a kind of coherent discussion and drive towards modeling real-world walk processes. So, lot of real-world spreading processes being modeled and studied, but real-world walk processes, not as much. We can do more of that. And then network analysis tools based off of flows and walk dynamics. This is happening every time I go to a conference. There's more nice tools that I can use to study walk dynamics and observe walks and flows. So that is very nice. What is my next slide? Okay, yes, my next slide is a thank you and a list of some of the papers that I've drawn on to look at this, to make this presentation.
Nice. We go back and forth between here and online.
Very interesting. More of curiosity than questions. With the payment that you described, do you know a payment is physical in a sense they are paying somebody, they are paying a shop, or they are online? It is useful to, because that may change a lot of how we use and buy things.
Oh, for sure. So at within these systems, it's you would only see the digital, transactions, but Sarafu, I don't think there's ever a way to pay for anything online with Sarafu. It's really more of a local, it's very, very local, paying mostly paying in person, presumably. Within the kaleidoscope of now talking about national payment systems, right? So within this mobile money system, the bill payments and the top-ups those are digital purchases, right? And then the transfers longer distance to other people, so they're all digital. But you're also facilitating this money storage. The mobile money system is facilitating kind of on the ground cash payments as well, although you're not seeing those actual payments within a system at a bank like you might find in the US or Europe, Netherlands and Italy. You run into some complications where often online payments is a different category sometimes, so you have to know really which of these merchants correspond to online payments. Sometimes there are particular categories for online payments. Sometimes there are separate payment systems for online, so the data is like this data is in a separate place, which might show up within like data from a bank that might show up as there being like one big node where all of those transactions are going to. So if you're doing, it really depends on, it's a case by case basis how these particular payments are recorded, but usually you can see. Usually there's some way to tell if it's an online payment or an in-person payment.
Question. So I'm sort of analogizing this to some data collection tasks in neuroscience, where if you want an image part of the brain, you might like find this small region of the mouse brain, get hundreds of neurons, and from that data, the goal is to then try to like extrapolate some broader theory from it. And the Sarafu is a good example of one where that's not really the case. We have all the data. But I'm wondering if there's a way of drawing the line around like, this is how much data you actually need in order to say meaningful about what is unobserved in the system. And like, can you do anything with the Sarafu data to actually benchmark some of that? So like, if they only gave me a 10% random sample of transactions, would I not have access to the like same insights that I'm getting, or at what point do I start to get?
Yeah, so I would draw a parallel even more to something like mobility data, where it's less private from a business standpoint, so it's more available than transaction data, but you still have this kind of very, very strong privacy issues at the individual level. And there several generations of researchers back, one generation being like one PhD, you had kind of figured out some aggregated ways to share this data in ways that are like aggregated, that in meaningful ways that you can use for as inputs to other things. So things like origin destination matrices and such. So providers are much more willing to share their, like, you have this, you can bring all of your really private data aggregated into an origin destination matrix, and then you can give that to the mobility modelers. Of course, to get there, if you don't yet have the concept of what an origin destination matrix is, then you would need to first develop the concept of the origin destination matrix, and then like the tools to create one, and then convince many people to share them. And then I must admit, I'm not super caught up on the latest mobility research, but also there's also like clearly limitations to origin destination matrices. So maybe one day ask me in 5-10 years if I have the equivalent to an origin destination matrix for these systems. I think it has to kind of be interfacing with modeling for sure.
But it seems like something like an industry specific, or maybe a sub-industry specific thing, where it's, you kind of had categories on those transactions. So maybe something around that, but I guess it would still remain to be seen whether that's actually like appropriate as a first thing? I think that's about actually the question.
Hi, Carolina. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes,
Hi.
I can hear you.
Nice talk. Sorry, I had to leave for a brief moment, but I wanted to ask you about this specific example that you have of digital currency or community currency has a lot of social aspect to it, right? Is people actually exchanging money because they get together. It's like more like the sell here in the United States, and it's less transaction, and it's less, let's say, transaction value in the sense that if I'm paying for a good, it doesn't matter who I'm paying to. I mean, it's just paying for the good. So how much do you think that the result that you get at reflecting the social, let's say, aspect of the people behind, and how much is just purely transactional, transactional value between these agents?
Yeah. So, and to restate the question in the sense of like, to what extent do any of the results from Sarafu generalize to other systems? So I think the kind of core, this is one of the reasons why when I'm showing the network structure across the different like smaller modules, trying to point out like which ones are very consistent and which ones are not so consistent. So one of the things that is consistent across the different modules is this disassortativity and the fact that you do in fact need cycles. And so and that's also another work. Like disassortativity is very, very, very clear. We should expect that anywhere within our economic networks. And then to the extent that money is circulating, you do need to eventually you need to be closing cycles somewhere. However you're doing that, you're very right that within Sarafu, a lot of that is happening and facilitated by these kind of savings groups at a local level, and you have a very very clear, it is a community currency, right? Like there's a clear dynamic there. It also means that there's less privacy issues with it because people have to be open about the fact that they want to pay in this currency. They're willing to accept this complementary currency in order to use it. I do not expect to see the like very modular at the local level kind of payment dynamics once we get in if we're looking at larger systems. I don't imagine we would see like 95% of transaction volume happening within like a local community, right? That's not what's going on within the world as a whole. So network structure stuff, yes. But I also expect to see more diversity, like I do not expect to see homophily on something like occupation or role or anything to do with your economic activity. In fact, I expect more of a more complementarity going on there. Ni and Chentai are very different entities, but there's transactions between them. So yeah, a lot of, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I think the systems have a lot of, still a lot of social dynamics underneath, like group sharing, I don't know, tasks or gatherings or families and communities, etc. But as you are just saying, there's also the role of vendors. I mean, people that are selling things, and those are basically not related socially to the. So that's what I was asking. I mean, what is the relationship between that social aspect and then the more, let's say, traditional merchant buyer or merchant client relationship?
Yeah, Sarafu is definitely on the social end of it, but even so, you see disassortativity rather than assortativity, right? So I do think it's very valuable to consider economic networks and social networks as like things worth studying in their own right separately. Of course, it's also very interesting when we put them together. But given that we have such a greater understanding of what our social networks look like, and much less understanding of the patterns that we ought to be expecting in economic networks, whenever you put the two together, it'll be a bit lopsided. You'll know so much better intuition, so much more science to build on from the social side, that I think it's very valuable to take examples. What do we know about just the economic networks?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you again, Carolina. And you are here the rest of today.
Oh yeah, I'm here the rest of today and also tomorrow and perhaps Thursday morning. So if anybody wants to find me, you can send me a message. I have a Northeastern email, mattsson.c@northeastern, or just come find me.
Yes, cool. All right, thank you. I'm going to turn this off.
Can I stop sharing?